Hey guys, welcome to the cool corner of the basement where I have some of my favorite, rarest, most valuable, most interesting sets. For example, Silvertone 8132, their first tabletop set with push-button tuning. Philco 37690, some might consider the highest end radio Philco ever made. Our CA741 PCS rear projection set. Philco Predicted Tandem, and so on. Now, I declared a few months ago this is going to be the year of big things. What do I mean by that? I meant getting to some of sets like these. In particular, we're going to start working on a set I got way back, I believe in 2013, that I've teased about, I've talked about many, many times, but never dug into it. That's about to change. It's a Dumont, but it's not one of these. So this is a Dumont Doghouse, which uses the RA-102 chassis, which I believe was their most used chassis. They used it in a bunch of their sets and licensed it to Crosley and Stromberg Carlson. But before the 103 came the 102 and the 101. Any set that uses those chassis is pretty rare. And in this case, I'm talking about a Dumont Clifton from 1947 with the RA-102 chassis. Now, I did a video or two or three on this way back when I got it, back at the old apartment. Well, I talked about it. I got service info, ordered up some parts for it, but I never got around to working on it. Then we moved to the house, and it got put down here, and it's been sitting here all this time. Now, back when I got it, I dreamed about owning one of these for years, and I'd never seen one come up for sale, and I figured if one ever did, it'd be crazy expensive. Little did I know there was an eccentric collector in New York that had a warehouse with floors of amazing stuff he had collected over his lifetime. Eli Buck, E-L-I-B-U-K was his name. Passed away, and the whole building went up for auction over days and days. It was medical equipment, astronomical stuff, microscopes. It was all early, like handmade brass, really cool stuff, and a bunch of radios and TVs as well. He had 3 of these. Part of that's probably because he was based in the Northeast where these were made. But that suddenly, hey, kind of opened up the floodgates of interest, because, like, not only is one coming up for sale, 3 of them. So they went up for auction. Long story short, I ended up getting the second one of the group. The first one was in the nicest condition. It sold for the most. I went for the middle one. And the third one ended up being purchased by Phil Nelson. It was in the roughest shape. He got it for a song, although he had to pay for shipping it all the way to the West Coast. Now, he beat me to the punch, and he restored his a few years ago. And if you go to his website, you can read about his trials and tribulations. And he got his working. But he had some problems I hope we won't run into, like his high-voltage transformer was bad. Now, since I got this, I did poke around. I'd pulled the chassis. So I know the condition of it is excellent. No corrosion. It's all complete. Missing the back, but aside from that, it's all here. A little bit of condition on the cabinet. Some finish loss here and there. I touched it up a bit crudely way back when. And I started working on the knobs. I stripped some of them. Then I'll get refinished. It uses wooden knobs. Now, if you're familiar with Dumont sets from the late 40s, they all have one thing in common, is that they have continuous tuners. So you see the same thing on that Dumont Doghouse, which also has wooden knobs. And on this, they have this continuous tuner. But this one is a little bit different. That's a little bit fancier than some of the later ones. It is, when these light up, it looks really neat, and that's something that I'm really anxious to see, because there are some layers. It's either glass or plastic, reverse painted, and there's green and red numbers behind there, and different sections light up as you go through the tuning. I believe it does the low VHF and then the FM radio band and the upper VHF channels. And on this side is something very few other TVs had, which is an AM radio with a tuning dial here, and there's a field strength meter in there. So unlike an I-tube that a lot of radios had back in the 30s to show you the signal strength and show you when you're on a strong station, this actually has a meter movement inside that I'm also really anxious to see. Removable panel here, a whole bunch more controls behind that. So in addition to all these controls, there's a whole bunch more down here. Now Dumont was known for being high-end and very well engineered. This is no exception. This has a lot of, well, you'll see it has two very large chassis. But something else I'm really interested in seeing, aside from the dials light up and just seeing this thing come back to life, this is something I don't think I've ever seen in any black and white TV, which is a regulated high voltage supply. It's something you don't hear much about, but conventional black and white sets, so these 10-inch sets or 12-inch sets, they run on around 9,000 volts nominally for the high voltage potential on it. They're unregulated, somewhat high impedance power supply, so that high voltage varies a lot with the scene brightness. So it's completely black, maybe it's 10,000 volts, and if the whole screen is really lit up bright, maybe drop down to 8,000 volts or less. This should hold steady no matter as the scene brightness changes, and I want to see what does that translate to in terms of image quality. Also, I'm sure this has DC restoration and really good bandwidth, and should be really interesting. Plus, there's a bunch of other interesting things. Alrighty, that wasn't too difficult, and there we go. Now, normally I would start with the power supply, but in this case I'm going to start with the upper chassis. I think it's going to be a bit easier to work on. So down here, power supply, so I was talking about the power transformer. It uses an AC type capacitor. I think it's 4 microfarad in parallel, I think, with the primary to keep the output voltage and current fairly steady. Here's the upper chassis. So one of the most unique things about this set is that it doesn't use flyback. It uses an RF regulated high voltage power supply, and that's what a bunch of this stuff is about. So there's a gas regulator too, gas discharge. I think it's a 0C3, and I think it's inside this box. There's so if you've seen my electrostatic TV projects, they have a little RF coil to make the high voltage. This has a much bigger version of that with a feedback loop, and there's an oscillator, and they sample the high voltage output with a resistive voltage divider and feed that back into the oscillator with a control tube, and using that as a voltage reference to hold the output steady. And the usual 5U4 rectifiers here, and that's the main power transformer in the back there. We'll go into a big cable to power the upper chassis. Plugs in there. Now, I don't have a flyback, so how do you horizontal deflection? This guy, which is the other very cool thing about this set. Those are 807 tubes. So this uses a horizontal output transformer. I believe that's a vertical output transformer, so they have a push-pull circuit driving the output transformer inside this can. I don't see too many TVs with 807s in them, do you? And there's the AM radio. See, it's got a conventional variable cap, and there's a loop antenna inside the cabinet. That's what this goes to. You got our CRT mounted up rather high off of the chassis here. And there's our continuous tuner. It's the Mallory induct tuner, but it's an early version of it. I believe this is our sound output here, and here's our high voltage output. Now, I said the CRT is a bit unusual. It's not your standard type high voltage connector. It has a little button on it, like you'd see more commonly in oscilloscope CRTs. Similar to their 12QP4 CRT, which is a bit more common. It's more bulbous and shorter than a more common 12LP4, Unlike the 12QP4, I believe this has an ion trap. Yeah, for sure, it's got an ion trap magnet here. The 12QP4, which some sets use, like the early version of the Dumont doghouse, they would get ion burn. But luckily this does have a trap. Now, depending on how good this looks, because this is a really important set to me in my collection, we may upgrade this to an aluminized CRT, like a 12KP4, because this is not aluminized. Aluminized CRT would be brighter and have a sharper image. But we'll see. Well, you know, we'll go with the original CRT. I did test it way back when, and it tested okay. So should be good enough to produce an image. Some of the labels came loose. That's what's floating around here. Actually, that's from a Filca. That doesn't belong in there. But this, I believe, is part of the front. So if you remove that front panel, I said that there were controls up there. This is part of the label. It fell off. And originally there was a back. You see the screw holes here. I do have photos from another collector that has one. So someday I may fabricate one out of masonite. I'll get a bit of a look at the cabinet. So I mentioned about it, solid hardwood. Like, look at these, the legs that run around it. That's just a big old hunk of hardwood, walnut or something like that they routed out and supported on it. And all this is, some of this is plywood. I think this is plywood, but these bottom boards are solid wood, and boards around the front. If I could flip this cabinet over or look underneath, you'd see that a lot of the wood, like this piece up here, is solid wood. Oh yeah, you can see up here. So rather than being veneered plywood, it's veneered solid wood. These pieces are, what, 4 inches wide, and they buttered them together and glued them up, and then veneered the outside. Which is cool, but maybe not necessarily as stable as plywood, but that's what we got. That's what we got to work with. So we'll want to get this chassis out and start working on it. Feeling around. It's been a while. It feels like the 2 back screws are missing. There should be something holding this in place. Or not. Oh, okay. It's just weight. It's just weight holding this in. Alright, so I'm going to clear off some room on the workbench, and let's pop this guy up there. Very satisfying to finally get this up on the workbench, because this project is part of the reason I built this beefy workbench that's 8 feet long and 3 feet deep, because to get both these chassis up here hooked up, powered up, I'm going to need some space. Alright, let's take a closer look. As I said, the chassis are in good condition, no corrosion. Filthy, and somebody wrote, and I guess that's pencil, all the tube designators. I'm crazy about it, but hey, it's part of the set's history. There's that meter for the AM receiver. Dumont 12RP4. Better look at that high voltage connector. And there's the Mallory induct tuner. So this type of tuner, it's a continuous tuner. There are 3 or 4 roller inductors inside of this mechanism. If you ever encounter one of these, it's tempting to crank on the tuning shaft to try to turn it right now, and it won't turn, which is a pretty common issue with these because the grease inside these hardens. Don't force it. Open this up, clean it out, because it uses a ceramic shaft. It's brittle. You force that, the shaft shatters. You don't want to do that. Tubes for it. Plug into the side. So there are a lot of electrolytics in this. bunch on the main power supply chassis, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at least up here. So we're going to deal with those. Now, yes, this is a somewhat rare set. Less rare now that 3 more came out of the market at that auction since then. I know of a few others came up for sale just a few months ago. A guy on Facebook stumbled across one, wasn't even sure what he had, got it cheap. He was also in the Northeast where these were made and predominantly sold. I saw 1 or 2 listed on eBay. So by my count, let's see, so there's 1 at the museum in Ohio, 3 at the auction. I've seen about 2, 3 more for sale since then, and I have a few other guys that own them, so I'd say there's at least a dozen out there in the world. Don't know how many they made, hundreds, I'm sure, maybe a few thousand. I doubt more than that. And 47, TV was still in its infancy. Total production for that year was something like 250,000 sets or something like that across all makes, all models. And they only made the set for a brief time. As you can imagine, it was very, very expensive. And then they came out with the RA-103, which was a much more refined version of this. They also used this chassis in the club set, which is even rarer. That was made for custom installations. So they sold that chassis without a cabinet, and then they made a version for like bars or motels. I know of 1 or 2 of those out there. Anyways, what am I getting at is how much care do I want to take into doing the restoration. So if you've been watching any of the RR359 RCA videos, I'm going to ridiculous lengths with that to fabricate resistors, dog bone resistors, for example, to look as much like the original as possible, cloth-covered wiring, that kind of thing, restuffing all the caps. This I'm less inclined, especially when you see the type of paper caps they used in this, really not amenable to restuffing. So back to these electrolytics, I'm not quite sure what I want to do. No, I'm not going to remove them and drill holes and mount adapter caps. That I'm not going to do. But you can see these are little stubby guys. The main filter caps are on the main chassis. These are smaller ones. I think they're all 10 microfarad. And I forget how many sections there are in each one. So it might be possible I just leave these, disconnect them, and tack in new caps down below. Let's take a look. Bottom of the chassis is completely covered by a steel plate here. It's got one screw left. And here we go. Voila. Not much to it. Especially because it's all so spread out. A lot of carbon comp resistors, of course. Crazy long shafts, so we have all these controls on the front for the fine adjustments. But the pots are way back here, so we have 5 long shafts. This one is plastic. I must have wanted to insulate that. It's kind of a funky connector on the front end too. So frozen. There we go. Oh, all these controls are frozen. Deoxide in there. There we go. Okay. We need high voltage transformer. Got a ginormous rheostat here for something. And a pot up here. Trimmer cap. Very inconveniently located. We'll want to find out what that's for. Make adjustments up here before it goes back in the set. Another pot up here. So I mentioned about the caps not being amenable to restuffing. Well, they're the sealed type, which are like Tootsie Rolls. I mean, I'm not kidding. They're blobby, waxy things with a thin piece of paper wrapped around them. There's nothing to restuff. It's just basically they wrapped up the paper in foil, dip the thing in wax and put a paper label around them, and they get very deformed. This one is a good example where it's very dented and misshapen. Alright, so I am not going to attempt to replicate these. A few are replacements too, I think, like that red cap right there in the center. But if that is a repair that is well done, there are minimal signs of any work really having been done to this set. Alright, so what kind of caps am I going to use? Well, I have some Mallory M150s I got a while ago. I think they may still make these. They're part of the Vichy Electronics group these days, but they're not white like this. They're yellow, if they're still made at all. Did a little research and it wasn't entirely clear. But anyways, way back when I got this, I ordered up a set of these, so I showed everything I need. And for the electrolytics, I got Nichicons, 105 degrees Celsius long life type. A bunch of them are 500 volt varieties. In particular, there's a whole mess of 10 microfarad 500 volt caps I got. And so that's what most of these caps are, these multi-section electrolytics. So you can see how some of them are mounted down here below. They're twist locks. So I'm not entirely sure how I want to do that. Curious, just noticed on this one it's 4 sections, but they didn't use one section. One up here is mounted a little bit differently. Looks like... yeah, so definitely not all the same. 3 section, 3 or 4 section. That guy's only a 1 section. Well, one thing in my favor, if I want to untwist these to rebuild them, they're not twisted on there very well. Sometimes I really crank on them and rotate them 90 degrees, and when you untwist them, they snap off. But these look like they just gave a slight little twist to them, so I think that's where I'll head with that. But we can try a slow power up with the original caps installed. They may still have some life left. I have no idea why this set was retired. It may have been working when they stopped using it, or maybe something really bad happened. That's what we're going to find out. So, paper caps, and there are a number of axial electrolytics. We got one here, and I believe one over there. I also have axial electrolytics to replace those. That'll be super straightforward and easy. We can test the resistors to make sure they're good, like we have a number of power resistors here. I don't want those to be open. The high frequency circuitry, like we have along here, no paper caps. We got some mica, some tubular ceramic, of course a bunch of carbon comps. That one looks like a replacement, or at least the printing on it's different. So we shouldn't have to do much there. Hey, we actually have a solid state diode, which for 1947 was pretty darn early. Interesting, because they used some 6AL5 dual diode rectifiers. There's at least one 6H6 octal type dual diode, but they also have a semiconductor diode in here. Probably the video detector. Now I don't know if Sam's Photo Effect made a set for the RA-102, but I do have it in Riders number 1, and I have a Dumont Compendium of Service Info. So we're good on that front. So I intend to just start diving into this and take care of all those paper caps and the electrolytics, and ponder how I want to restuff these electrolytics, or if I want to do it at all right now, and check all the pots as we go.